I am making pie crust today, kind of a favorite recipe from a cousin, and I'll show you how to put it together, put it in the pan, and what it should look like when it's baked. I've put in here 2 2/3 cups of flour, and then I will put in 1/2 teaspoon of salt and mix that together. Okay, then I'm going to kind of make a well in the center. And this is butter flavored Crisco that I'm going to add. I'm going to take about 1/2 of it out, add it in to the flour. And then I'm going to just mash this together until I come up with very fine pellets. Takes a little while to incorporate it. Now, I'm going to add the rest of the Crisco. Oh, and I wanted to get it fine. You can see that. Then I'm adding the rest of the Crisco. And we'll mash this in till about the size of peas. And I'll show you when I get it in. Now the reason I divide it like that is the first half I kind of incorporate it more, and then it seems to make it a little flakier. But now you can see it's a little larger in there, the pieces of Crisco with the flour. Next, I'm going to measure out 1/2 cup of really ice cold water. And you can see I've put ice in it to get it really cold. And then I'm going to measure 1/2 cup. Try to get it as close as you can. Try not to get the ice in it. And I'll just pour that right in the center and then mix it together. Now it's interesting, when you're measuring out flour, it doesn't always come out exactly the same as a cup. Sometimes it's mashed down a little more. And so when I get it to about this point, then I make a decision whether I need to add a little more water. And right now, as you can see, there's still a lot of flour that isn't wet. So I'm just going to add just a little more water, because I want it a little softer. Now a lot of people mix this with their hands, but I don't like to get the Crisco warm. The colder you can keep it, the better it is. Seems like I've had to add a lot this time. Okay. Usually 1/2 cup will do it. Now that it's holding together like that, I am going to use my hand and just get it together in a ball. See? Try to pick up all the lone pieces. Wish you could feel it. It's soft, but I can just still tell that it's not overly warm. And we have a large ball like this, okay? And I'm going to just divide it in half. Now at this point, I put it in plastic wrap, and I put it in the refrigerator for about 20 minutes. And now we're going to roll it out. I have a mat that I put down, more to save my granite counters than anything, but I put a little flour and move that around, put a little on the rolling pin, and then I'm going to mash it down. And see how it cracks on the edges? That's okay, but you just want to keep those cracks together. And you roll from the center out like a spoke. And I'm going to roll this out to about 12 inches across. And I have an advantage because I have a gadget that shows me 12 inches, but it's about 1/8 of an inch thick. Now, if you get any splits along the side, you want to stop and repair the splits so that it doesn't get too bad. Okay? Now, if you do not have one of these mats, this is how I tell if it's big enough. I get it out to where I think it's the right size. Try to be as consistent as you can. See how it's lifting here? That means don't be worried about that. That's telling me it's flaky, okay? Then I put this on, and as long as I've got about 1 inch around the outside, then it's big enough. All right, then you have to be careful when you pick it up. Pick it up into and make a quarter. Then take your pie plate and put it down in there. And then adjust so that it's about the same all around the edge. Just don't stretch it much, because when you stretch the pie dough, it shrinks in the oven. Okay? So the next thing I do is just take my finger and move it into the edge. Just mash it down into the edge and get it nice, and try to get it nice and flat. Now, I like to make kind of a fancy edge. So what I'm going to do is just roll the excess over and make, I'm just folding it over, making sure the cracks are, it's like playing with clay. Just get it so it's looking like about that. And sometimes you have thinner spots, and when you do, like right here, I move it a little bit from the heavier spots over so that I get kind of an even edge. Got it pretty thick right here, but we'll just move some around a little bit. See how that looks without a lot of splits in it? Okay, then just kind of go back and make sure it's into the pan. Now, here's the fun part. This is the part to make this pie crust look ripply around the outside. Now, some people just cut it off and do a fork around. You can do that, but when I was living at home, my dad loved pies, and everybody could make pies, but I figured out I'd just make it so it looked prettier than everyone else's, whether it tasted good or not. So that's the reason I do this. All right, I just take my aggressions out and pinch it lay my finger next to the one I just did and pinch it again. And pinch it up pretty high, as much as you can. Move it around, getting that lay to the pinch. And basically you can do any edge you want, but I always liked this because it was so roughly. Okay, our pie crust has been completed for a 1-crust pie. And before we put it in the oven, we have to pierce it all over the bottom and along the sides so that when it's baking it doesn't puff up. You can see from this one all of the fork imprints that are completed. Also notice the browning around the edge. That's what we want to achieve once it's been baked. Okay, and I've also put fork imprints in the sides. This is a crust that has been baked in the oven at 350 degrees from 10 to 15 minutes. I just want to get the edges browned and it's crispy now. Then you take it out of the oven and you cool it completely before you put anything else in it. Now, we're going to make this one an apple pie. So I'm going to put the top on the apple pie. So here's the other half.
What did you do to the crust on this one?
I just rolled this. I rolled this out to the same 12-inch. I laid it on the side, and I have just kind of rolled it under. And I'll show you what I'm going to do with the second crust. Okay? So I want to get the crust rolled out here. Now we're going to make this shell an apple pie that we bake in the oven. And I have cut up 6 apples and sliced them fairly thin. Okay, and I've added cinnamon, nutmeg, sugar, and some flour, and a little lemon juice to keep the apples from turning dark. And then we put this all together and just get that sugar coated all over the apples. You just peel them, peel the apples and cut them up, whatever size you want. I happen to do it with an apple peeler, but okay. Smells good. I can smell the cinnamon and all the yummy stuff. Okay. Now, this was the pie shell that I was showing you how to do the edges. I just flattened those out, and I'll show you and I didn't put any fork holes in it because we don't want this to leak into the pastry. So now my apples are ready, and I'm going to just dump them in here. Make sure you get all the sugar and the cinnamon and all the yummies. Kind of pile them up. Now, this is where we're going to add this pie shell to the top, and I'll show you how to fix that. There needs to be an air vent in the center. So I'll do an air vent like this. so that the steam can come out. And then let's just fold this up like we did the other one. Now, on the top of this, before we put the pastry on, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of butter to the top. And just kind of move it around. Okay. Now, I'm going to wet my fingers a little bit and put some water around the edge. This is so it will seal the top to the bottom. Okay, try to get that design right in the center. And then I'm going to kind of trim this up a little bit so I don't have quite as much pastry on the top. Just kind of trim it the same amount all the way around so you don't have any big overlaps. But then I'm going to pick up the bottom and round the top over. We're going to get a closer up shot because what we're trying to do is take the bottom and roll this around it so that you've got a good seal and all of your juices don't run out. Something interesting about fruit pies is if you look at the old westerns, they're cooling their fruit pies on window shelves. They're not sticking them in a refrigerator. Well, maybe they didn't have a refrigerator, but fruit pies, because they don't have eggs in them, they don't have to be in the refrigerator. Okay, so we are getting around with this all tucked under. See that big edge of dough. Now we're ready to crimp it, and we can crimp it the same way with our thumb and finger as we go around. Here the pie's completed. All the edges have been sealed, and I did the crimping around it. Now, before I put it in the oven at 375 degrees, I'm going to just sprinkle some granulated sugar across the top. And this just kind of makes it pretty. And then we're going to put it in that 375 degree oven. I've loosely covered this with tin foil. I'm going to put it in the oven for 25 minutes. Then after 25 minutes, I'll take the tin foil off and cook it another 25 minutes. Okay, we've put the apple pie in the oven, set it on a timer for 25 minutes. Remember, we've got aluminum foil over it. If we didn't have that on there, it would brown too much because we cook that pie for about 50 minutes total. Now, I've separated egg whites and the yolks, and I've beaten that up. And what I'm going to do, and because it's double, I did 6 egg yolks. I'm going to put sugar in, and the sugar is 3/4 of a cup. Of course, now I've got a cup and a half because I'm doing 2 pies. And I'm putting in 2/3 cup of flour. In the recipe for 1 pie, it's 1/3. Okay? And I'm going to mix that together. And we we need to add a half a teaspoon of salt. Now I can't find my stuff. Okay. And just mix that together. Now I've already taken out 4 cups of milk, and I'm going to slowly add that and stir it. And about this time you can turn on your stove to a medium heat and stir it until you get it smooth. That flour will lump up on you if you're not careful. Sometimes I take a whisk and I whisk it up. Okay. Now remember, 1 pie is 2 cups of milk, 2 pies is 4 cups of milk. Now I changed to a whisk so I can make sure I'm getting rid of all of the flour bubbles in there. And I've mixed it up. Now I need to bring this to a boil and cook it for 2 minutes after it comes to a mild boil. That doesn't mean you want to boil it over the top. And you have to keep checking it because you don't want it to stick to the bottom. It's a really good idea to use a heavy bottom pan, which I use this old pan because it is heavy. And then I can bring it to a boil and watch it pretty closely. Okay, our cream has come to a small boil, and I'm going to cook it for 2 minutes, but I want you to see that it's thick. It's coating the spoon, so it's looking really good at this point. I don't see any clumps in there. And once it's cooked here for a little bit longer, then I'm going to add some of this hot cream to my egg yolks. Stir it up really good and then slowly pour it into the cream. And the reason we do that is we don't want the eggs to just be poured in there cold because they will cook in little clumps. You don't want egg clumps in there, okay? It's about ready. It's pretty thick. All right, I'm going to remove it from the heat to do this. And I'm going to I add a little over about 2/3 cup of that cream. And I stir it up really good. Put it back on the heat, and you're going to slowly add these eggs while you're stirring to this bubbling cream. Here's our cream, and I'm going to add the egg mixture into it. See how it's just adding in slowly, and we'll get that all in there. Stir it all up so that that egg is cooking. And you can see it's kind of bubbling around the edges. All right. See how yummy that looks? And now we need to cook it so that the eggs are cooked. We need to cook it another 2 minutes. But you have to stir it continuously or it will burn on the bottom. Now, this is done, it's thick, but I have to add the vanilla to it. And I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Okay. Looks like 3 there, but I had the half teaspoon. And then I'm adding 6 tablespoons of butter. And you stir that up until the butter's melted. And it's creamy. This is where you want to start licking the spoon, but you don't do it because it'll burn your tongue right off. Okay. Now, if for some reason you have lumps in it that you don't like I do have a couple of lumps, but it'll be all right. I put it through a fine strainer, and those lumps will be gone. All right. Now at this point, I'm going to pour half of this cream into one of these bowls and half in the other. One will be a banana cream pie, and the other will be coconut cream pie. Now I'm just pouring half of the cream in here. Hopefully I'll get about even, and half in this one. And I've got to scoop some of this out. Okay. Now this one I'm going to add a cup of sweetened flaked coconut and stir it up so that it's all smooth in there. The most important part is we're now going to put plastic wrap on the top. And the reason we're doing that is that it has to cool off before you can put it into the pie shell. And once you put it in the pie shell, then you put plastic wrap on it again until you're ready to eat it. And then you can put whipped cream on the top and serve it cold. But let it get really nice and cold, and then you can scoop it out and put it in your pie shell. This one will be banana cream. And what we do with banana cream is we cut up 3 to 4 bananas in slices and just put them in the bottom of the pie shell. And then you pour the cooled cream over it, and you have your banana cream. So the idea is to use bananas that are about this ripe. You don't want them too green. You don't want them too browned because they won't taste good. And you're just going to cut them up in the bottom of the shell, like that. And you're going to just pile up 3 or 4 of them, depending on the size of your bananas. Okay? Now, I'm not going to cut them up right now because this has got to cool off before I can pour it on there. And once you're ready to pour that on, cut your bananas up, pour the cream on, put more plastic on the top, put them in the fridge until they are cool or till you're ready to serve. Okay, the pie shells are ready to use. They're cooled, and once the cream is cooled, we'll pour it into the pie shells. Remember, one is a coconut cream, one is banana cream. Once it's cooled, I would pour the cream over the bananas and then replace the plastic over that and let it cool off completely. That way, you're not going to get a skim of stuff on the top. Then I would add whipped cream to the top when I'm ready to serve, and it's done. Okay, the pies are completed. I've put the coconut cream in this one. I've put the banana, sliced up 4 bananas in the bottom of this one, and then put the cream on the top. Put plastic on it to keep it from getting a scum on the top. And I'll show you how I did that with this coconut cream. And just before you serve it, you want to add some whipped cream to the top, or Cool Whip. Whipped cream is good, but Cool Whip will work. And this needs to cool, so let it sit on the counter with something under it to cool. And those pies look good enough to eat. Thanks, family.